Hi, this is Ed Breniger, and in this video, I want to speak to how we elevate the leadership capacities of people. And this video is really about change, and change in three very significant ways. And so before I go to those three ways, I really need to try to convince you that your future, the future of your work, the future of your organization, the future of your community is not dependent on how well you do what you've already been doing, but rather how clear you see the ways that you need to change in order to meet the demands that are coming in a world that is in deep transition. And there is no negotiation on this, I don't think. I think the changes that are being thrust upon us require us to think differently and to relate differently and to organize differently than we have ever done before. And so when we capture this large picture of what is required of us around the simple idea of how do we elevate the leadership capacities of people, I think it begins to focus our efforts on where the real change can happen. So let's begin with this. We have assumed that leadership is a role and a title in an organizational structure. We have seen leadership as a structural component of a business or an organization or a community, when it is a function in many respects of actually how a person acts and makes decisions and relates within the context of the role that they have. And so we look at, say, the president of a company, or the mayor of a town, or the principal of a school, and to a large extent, the way we measure them is not the way they measure themselves. We look to them in terms of how they relate to people. We look to them in terms of how they speak and how well they communicate. We look to them in terms of how well they solve the problems that we, their constituents, perceive as the problems that are their responsibility to solve. And so when they don't, then their leadership is called into question. And that's the problem, because we have isolated leadership to be this function of those who are at the very top level of a leadership, of a organizational structure. So leadership as a structural thing, I think, has now worn itself out. It is no longer a valid way of understanding the role that people in an organization have. Instead, I believe that leadership is a function of actually how we live. So my definition of leadership is that all leadership begins with personal initiative to create impact that makes a difference that matters. So it's something that everyone can do by taking personal initiative. It is something that they can create by creating change. For impact is simply a change that makes a difference that matters. We talk a lot about impact. The word is thrown around, oh, that he's an impactful person or she's a person of impact, but we never really define that. And I'm defining it here as some change that can be identified that makes a difference that matters. Now, I want you to think about that idea as something that everyone within an organization can do. Imagine the maintenance people on the machines that operate in your manufacturing facility. Imagine what it means for them to take personal initiative to create impact that makes those machines work better. And so they're going to have an effect upon all the machine operators. They're going to have an effect upon everyone who receives the products that you're manufacturing, because they have chosen to take initiative to make a difference by changing something which they saw as needed. So they can be taught, trained, and supported to function in that kind of leadership role. But let's take this one step further. Let me show you the circle of impact model. The circle of impact is based upon 3 dimensions of leadership. Now, I'm suggesting by this model that everyone within an organization can learn to utilize this model. They can use it to define how they are going to approach the work they do. And there are 2 levels to this. There's the level of what you see right here. So everything is focused upon impact. Everything is focused on creating change that makes a difference that matters. So we look at our ideas. We ask the question, how do our ideas make a difference that matters? How do our values, what are our values, and how do they make a difference that matters? How do we define our purpose as a business? Or how do I define my purpose within the role that I play within the company, as a salesperson, or as a secretarial person, as an assistant, as a manufacturer, as a designer? How do I define my purpose for impact within the role that I have within the business? What is my vision for impact through the structure of the company? Secondly, what is the impact that we should expect and nurture in our relationships with one another? I've come to identify that the quality measure for our relationship should be that of respect, trust, and mutual accountability. So ask your team, do we respect one another? Do we trust one another? Do we trust our leaders? Do we trust the people that work for us? Do the people who we serve respect the work that we do for them? And how do we develop a mutual accountability where we are learning from one another by sharing things that we learn through our own mistakes, through our own research, through our own activity of study, and seeking to understand things better? And how do we create structures that are focused on impact rather than simply the internal measures of efficiencies that tend to dominate the way organizations look at themselves? So if you're teaching people to look at their work as a set of ideas, relationships, and structures, and if you're asking them to say, how do I think better, more clearly, so that I can have an impact? How can I relate better? How can I communicate better so that I can have more impact? How can I innovate and change the work, the way I do my work, so that I can have more impact? If you can help people learn how to do that, and you support them in doing that, then your organization is going to shift from being leadership starved to being leader rich. And catch that distinction there. We're going from a concept which is not present widely within the organization to people who are present widely in an organization, people who are leaders present widely in the organization. So what is it that we need to train people to do? I think that the training that needs to happen and the support for this training, so that it is aligned and coordinated throughout the entire organization, is 3 things. We need to help people learn how to solve problems. And you can use the circle of impact to do that. They can solve problems using a methodology, which I can teach you how to use that. We also need them to help them learn how to communicate better. So think about this. The people who are at the lowest echelon of the organization taking personal initiative to communicate in an impactful way with everyone within the organization. Imagine what happens when people begin to communicate in such a way that they're saying, here's what I'm seeing, how I need help in figuring out how to do this better. And so that those lines of communication are not lines of authority and power, but rather lines of, we are all sharing the same commitment to impact for this organization, and we're all going to support one another in building the relationships that we need so that each person can solve the problems that they need and to create an innovative way of doing their work better. And so if we're communicating better, we're going to be collaborating better. We're going to have relationships forming where there is respect and trust and mutual accountability. And so this is not about a collection of people just doing their thing. No, this is about how you bring the whole organization together so that they're working together. And that leader-rich environment is a culture which will find itself sustaining itself over time and sustaining itself even as executives come and go, even as new people come and go. Because what you're focused on as an organization is a clarity about impact that is defined by your values, by a sense of purpose, and a vision for how we are going to work together through the structure to create impact. And I believe you can train people to do that, and I know you can support them in doing that. So that's the level of the workers. What also needs to happen is that we need to train the managers, the supervisors, in how to be people who train their people in these skills and support them in their work as leaders of impact. So what is the long-term impact of having a leader-rich organization where you've elevated the leadership capacities of people? I think it frees up the executive level to see a bigger picture of what their future might be. It allows them to be less focused on problems that bubble up from the bottom that the people below them are refusing to resolve. It allows them to be freer to imagine and to operate strategically for the benefit of the whole, which is really why they are there. They're not there to solve the day-to-day problems. They're there to be strategic and decisive about the future development of the company. For the managers, it really frees them from being squeezed by the expectations of their supervisors, their managers, and the people below them. And those people who are in the middle are then free to really be the agents of this elevation of leadership capacities. And that's what I see. And that is what excites me about the development of this idea in and through the 21st century, because it resolves many of the problems that the old mechanistic approach to the way we organize, it solves a lot of those problems. So it begins by change of perception, and it begins by clarifying what we value, and it begins by changing the way we relate to one another. And at that point, once those things begin to happen, we're then freer to say, you know, the way we are organized is really not well suited to achieving the impact that we want to have. And so it opens up, it removes those obstacles, it resolves those problems which have been created, which become a form of a gag upon the future of the organization. It opens it up so that the organization might grow. So that's what it means to elevate the leadership capacities of your people. If you want to know more, reach out to me. I'm glad to talk with you about it. Thank you. See you later. Bye-bye.